All right, welcome, my beautiful people, to This Week in Review. I'm coming at you a day early because, if you probably can tell, once again, I am not home. I'm overseas, and because of the time difference, I wanted to get this week in review in because if I wait till tomorrow, my usual time, uh, it's probably not going to broadcast in time for you guys to watch it. And I know a lot of you guys are already used to seeing my weekend review on Sundays. Anyway, so let me get right into this week in week's question, and it deals with booking on short-term rentals like Airbnb. You know, the question is, Fernando, what should I know when booking an Airbnb? And that's a very important question. And it's a question that we deal with day in and day out with our guests. And a lot of times, guests have the wrong expectations when they book a short-term rental. Now, it's becoming less and less because more people are getting used to the platform. But what I'm noticing now is that you're going to see a big shift. More and more Airbnb they're being managed by professional property management companies like ours. And more venture capitalists and big companies are getting into the short-term rental game. So the usual way someone books on Airbnb is going to be different, right? One of the things that you need to understand when you book any short-term rental from any platform is the following. The platform is who you're booking with. Our properties are on the specific platform, but the people that pay us are the platforms, unless you book direct. And that's a big distinction. The reason I say that is because when you create an account on Airbnb, VRBO, Booking, whichever platform, you're going to go through a verification process. But that verification process is for what we refer to the OTA, that platform. It's not for us. We require a separate verification process. And a lot of people get hung up on that and then not really understanding that they're two separate entities. Airbnb doesn't own my property. We just advertise on their platform, and people don't understand that. Where we see a lot of that now is with Marriott, right? We are a Marriott. Our properties are listed on the Marriott platform because Marriott, just like a lot of other high-profile OTAs or hotel chains, are getting into the short-term rental game. So we have properties that qualify for Marriott, and we partner with Marriott. Now, we get a lot of issues with Marriott guests because they think they're dealing with the Marriott Corporation when they come to us, and they're not. And that's what you need to understand. So that's the first big major difference, and something that I want everyone to know is that when you book a short-term rental from whatever platform, doesn't mean that you're going to get similar service unless you're booking from the same company, right? Because there's hundreds of thousands of short-term rental operators and OTAs, and each one has a different policy. Each OT or each manager has a different way of doing business. So I highly recommend that you first read everything about the booking. So before, let's say, for example, you go on Airbnb, before you go on and hit that book button, make sure you read everything related to that platform, what they require. So for example, we get this all the time as well. We require a deposit, a security deposit, which is a refundable deposit. It works the same way when you book a rental car or you go to a hotel chain. When you check in, they're going to ask for your ID, and they're going to ask for a form of payment for incidentals. We do the same thing. When you book with us, we're going to ask for ID, and we're going to ask for a deposit for damages or incidentals, or if you violate one of our rules. Works the same way. A lot of people get hung up on that because they say, well, I didn't read that. Well, if you didn't read it, it's not because it's not there. It's because you missed it and failed to read everything. So it's highly important that you read everything before you book. Now, here's another big thing. Like, it's happened to me as well. Like, as I mentioned, I'm in Europe. I'm staying at a short-term rental, and I almost booked a property that had I not read every detail about that property, I would have been staying at it was a beautiful property, but I would have been staying and sharing that property with the host, just something I don't like to do. I like to have my privacy. I don't want to have the host there. So had I not read that, like every detail, because it wasn't super clear, I would have booked the property and shown up, and the host was going to be staying with us. So very important you do that. Next thing you need to understand and really, really read the cancellation policy, because everyone has a different cancellation policy. So currently, let's just use Airbnb, for example. Airbnb has what's referred to as a flexible cancellation policy, a moderate cancellation policy, and a strict policy. And they also have a non-refundable policy that gives you a 10% discount if you choose that option. But people, read it and really read the fine print, because if you book that property and you have to cancel for whatever reason and you didn't read that, don't get into a fight with the host because it was your fault, right? Just make sure you read. The next is understanding the fees, right? I get a lot of people that fight with me on my security deposit saying it's a fee. Number one, it's not a fee. It's a refundable deposit. And we don't even take the money. It's a hold on your credit card. But nonetheless, read that and understand what are the service fees, what are the cleaning fees, what are the additional fees before you book. Now, if you're in California, you don't have to worry about it because California has passed a law where it's referred to as transparency, the transparency law in terms of fees. But it's always been transparent. Just people just don't look at it. They look at when it gets advertised, they'll see the daily rate, but they don't understand that there's going to be fees associated with that. But you're always going to see it before you hit the booking or confirmation button, right? But just make sure you read that, understand what they are. Next is make sure that if you need a specific amenity, that it's available. Now, like with me, I need my Wi-Fi needs to be big because I work remote and I do these live videos, or I do podcasts where I need that connection to be good. So if you need a specific amenity, like if you're a parent and you have small kids and you need pack and play, make sure you read, does it have it? And what does it require you to get it? Like, for example, we offer pack and plays and high chairs, but we require that the guest request that once they book. It's not automatic that you're going to show up. You're going to find a pack and play and a high chair on our properties. Now, if you tell us and if you follow our guidebook, all you have to do is hit the request button and it'll be there when you show up. So really, really look at the amenities and look to see if you have a specific amenity that you need, that they have it before you book. Next is going to be verifying the location. Now, I can tell you that on Airbnb, and I believe VRBO does the same thing, they're going to give you the general area. But if you need to be in a specific area, then before you book that property, make sure you send a message to the host saying, hey, I need to be in this area. Can you tell me what's the distance between your Airbnb and where I need to be? Or if you're looking for a specific area that you want to go to, make sure you inquire how far that Airbnb or that short-term rental is to your specific area that you want to go to. Oftentimes, if you just look at the map at the bottom, it's just a general map because they don't give you the specific location until you book. That's important. The next two or last two things I want to talk about is going to be in the house rules, right? Oftentimes, you're not going to see all the house rules until you book, but make sure that if you don't see everything there and you have a question about, does a place allow smoking? Does it allow pets? If you're going to show up in multiple cars, does the place allow or can accommodate multiple cars? Make sure you ask. Don't assume that just because you don't see it initially that it's not going to apply. Now, general stuff, don't worry about it. But when you need specific stuff or stuff that you know a lot of people are not going to accept, so use the cars for example. Our properties can only accommodate 2 vehicles. So if you know you're going to show up with 4 or 5 cars, you better ask before you show up, because then you might have a surprise. The last thing I want to talk about is extenuating circumstances, right? Read what it is and see if it applies. I can't tell you how many people book my property and then they say they have a medical emergency and they want a full refund because it's an extenuating circumstance. That doesn't apply, people. What applies is very specific. Oftentimes, it's going to be like a natural disaster. For example, now what happened in North Carolina, that applies. But a pending hurricane doesn't apply, right? Don't cancel and ask for a refund when there's supposed to be a pending hurricane coming and it hasn't come, because you're not going to get it. You can only get it after the fact, right? So understand what that is. And I don't know if I said this was going to be the last one, but the last one is, if you really want to understand and figure out if the property you're going to is something or it's going to fit your need or suits what you want, make sure you read all the reviews, not just the first 4 or 5 that are often displayed. Here's why I say that. Number one, if you just read the 4 or 5, you're missing out on the big picture. And it could be good or it could be bad, right? I'm currently staying at a short-term rental in which, had I only read the 4 reviews, I would have not booked this place, because you had one person who said they didn't like it because they found the place not as clean as they expected. So then I decided, and I always do, I read every review, and there was no other complaint about the place not being dirty. So I took that as a one-off, and I discarded that review. Got here, the place is perfect, people. There's no issues with the place. So this is why I highly recommend you read everything to see if there's a pattern. Because if there's a pattern, then you want to avoid that, right? But if there's no pattern, then just chalk it up as a one-off, because we're not going to please everyone. Everyone has specific tastes. That's why in my description, you never hear me, or you won't see me write stuff like, I have a super comfortable bed, because what's comfortable for me may not be comfortable for you, right? And so that's why you're not going to see that. Anyway, hope that answered that question. If it did, or if it didn't, do me a favor, leave a comment down below and I'll try to get back to it. But let's get into our numbers for this week. Let me share my screen. Okay, these numbers are from the 29th to present, which is the beginning of the month. So this week we brought in 27,000, a little over 27,000. We have 201 nights booked. We're at 54% occupancy rate. Not where I want to be, but almost as expected, because September and the first part of October usually are slow months, and usually slow months for all short-term rental operators, but specifically for us it is. Our RevPAR is at 137. Average daily rate is 137. RevPAR is at 74. Again, numbers are low because our occupancy rate is low. So remember that correlation with that. In terms of revenue source, Airbnb is at over 11,000. We're at 5.4. Booking is at 5.2. VRBO is at 4.3, and all others at 1.3. In terms of RevPAR per property, Miami is at 340. Dania Beach, 169. Miami is 158. Big House is at 154, and all others are averaging 80. And you can see that pattern there. In terms of Staffing, nothing to report in terms of staffing. Projects, as you can see, I'm in Europe. We're going to be doing some work over here. We're still working on the trying to figure out what we're going to be doing with some of the couples resort that I mentioned before with Timbercraft. I'm hoping that not with this hurricane that hit Georgia and North Carolina, we might be delayed. I'm trying to get Doug to come over to the property in Georgia so we can start planning stuff out. So it's going to take us a little bit. And again, this hurricane that hit delayed us a little bit on that. In terms of challenges, I will just revert back to the question, because that's a big challenge for us. And if you're a short-term rental operator, you know what I'm talking about. Really setting up expectations is really important, and you do that through your listing descriptions. But people understand that a lot of you guys don't read, right? This is why I thought this was a great question, one that I should address, because you guys really need to read. And it'll set you up for success, and it'll alleviate some of the short-term rental operators from having to constantly answer the same questions that we normally do. Now, again, it's our job to do that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't ask questions, but it really, for you as a guest, if you want a stress-free stay, something that's going to be more enjoyable, then make sure you do your due diligence before you book a property. Anyway, hope that was useful. I love you guys. For those that are watching live, thank you. And I'll see you guys on the next one.